Architectural Builder Supply is pleased to present you with this recording of the technical question that is listed in the title of this video.
This call may be monitored and recorded for quality assurance.
Yeah, let's do hollow metal doors. So hollow metal doors are... hollow metal doors compete against other doors like aluminum storefront when it comes to exterior openings, and generally you're going to find aluminum storefront on the front of the strip mall and steel and hollow metal doors on the back of the strip mall. And hollow metal doors, they're never hollow. And how they got that name, I'm really not sure, but they were never hollow. So when it comes to hollow metal doors, because that is what they're properly called, you'll have lots of variations, and the variations are only in that you take the same thing and then you change the gauge of the steel, meaning how thick is that face sheet. You change the steel type, and that boils down to it's either cold rolled steel or it's galvanized. And if it's galvanized, it's one type of galvanizing or it's another type. So it's corrosion resistant.
Okay.
And you can change the steel into stainless for that matter. You can do stainless steel hollow metal doors where it's type 304, even 316. And you'll see that material often. Mass transit authorities will use stainless steel hollow metal doors and frames because of their corrosion resistance. So in terms of gauges, a very low end door is a 20 gauge door, which I haven't sold in years. Extremely low end. If you were to punch the face of that door, you'd probably dent it. You would severely hurt your fist, but you'd dent the door. 18 gauge is the commercial standard for hollow metal doors. So to get anything heavier than that, you're going to be specifying it, meaning someone's going to tell you a specific gauge. So if someone says, I need a hollow metal door, it's almost okay to assume they want 18 gauge because that's typical. You get into 16 gauge, that makes sense because that's far heavier, much more resistant to just general use and abuse, even vandalism. You can even get up to 14 gauge doors, and that's for extreme high volume. Like you would put a 14 gauge hollow metal door on a sports stadium, something that's literally going to get the daylight beat out of it.
Okay.
Now, when it comes to frames, just as an aside, the gauge of the steel of the frame is always the next size bigger. So it's either going to be 20, 18, 16, or 14 on doors, and it will be 18, 16, 14, and 12 on frames. You're not often going to see an 18 gauge frame, but if it's a residential application, like a condo building, multi-family housing, yeah, you'll see 20 gauge hollow metal doors and 18 gauge frames. It's not unheard of at all because 16 gauge is standard for commercial. So the gauge of the steel is what has to be defined. The next is the core type. So very typical and common is what we would call honeycomb. And honeycomb is, if you were to Google that, it's just the way that it looks and sounds. Very common, very typical. Seco's standard Regent door, which is probably the most common door in the world, is honeycomb core. It has a particular redeeming value in terms of its R value. It's not awful as honeycomb, but you're always, you're not going to end up really using a honeycomb door in the sense of honeycomb is always going to be associated with the least expensive, least performing product, like 20 gauge would be. So you'd be at honeycomb unusually, but polystyrene would be the standard insulated core. You wouldn't call honeycomb insulated. It wouldn't be an insulated door, but polystyrene would. And you can find the definition of polystyrene in any manufacturer's catalog Going up from there, you'd have polyurethane. It's far higher on the R value, far higher.
What's that R value again? I can't remember what that term means.
Just the ability to retard the transmission of energy. You know, it's going to be or a U factor. It'll be a much better caliber of insulation. It also happens to be a lot more expensive today than it was 30 years ago. It's also really bad for the environment. So you can still do polyurethane, but it's usually associated with a much heavier, more expensive door. So polystyrene is the happy medium.
Okay.
After that, you can get into what's called a steel stiffened door, and that's literally bent channels of steel on the core of that door, like 6-inch on center. And those channels kind of look like hats. They call them hat channels sometimes, because that's kind of what they look like. And they're placed together, and then that door is welded together. And between those 6-inch centers would be an insulating material called mineral rock wool. Kind of looks like steel wool, even though it's certainly not steel wool. And they fill those voids. And once upon a time, it took a steel stiffened door to actually get a 3-hour fire rating on a door. Well, you know, that was the 70s. So, you know, their ability to get a 3-hour out of a honeycomb door is no problem. So gauge of steel, the core type. After that, every manufacturer is going to have at least one, and usually more than one, method of how they build the doors in terms of how the steel is bent and assembled. That's more of a nuance in the sense of certain doors the manufacturer is going to offer may only be offered in a particular method of assembly or construction, either a more economical method of assembly, like the Seco Regent door. If you look at that versus the Seco Medallion door, you're going to see two very different methods of construction. And one is meant to get the daylights beat out of it and look pretty at the end of the day. That's the Medallion. The Regent's going to succumb because it's just interlocked. There's actually no welding. So the construction of the metal door is very important to think about. When your customer has an application that's anything other than typical. So like all of our conversations, they can go on far too long because I'm rambling. You can do the same with a customer talking about the different door types. And 99% of the time, you're dealing with an 18-gauge, cold-rolled polystyrene door. That's it. We're not even talking about what the edge of the construction looks like because it's not important. What is important is to talk to your client about what kind of level of abuse they need to be able to tolerate. If it's the door in the back of a Dunkin' Donuts, you know, you could make an argument that a 18-gauge cold roll is not a good idea because that door is going to get the daylight beat out of it for the years it's going to be installed. You could argue for a 16-gauge galvanized door there. But if it's also a door that's never, ever, ever going to be opened, yeah, 18-gauge is perfect. Or again, it's the door, it's the egg. When you leave a Trailblazers game, you know, and you're exiting down the stairwell out those steel doors into the parking lot, yeah, and they just lost. Those better be really heavy-duty doors. So it's really talking about what does the client need to, you know, they're spending a lot of money for a door to begin with because it's not 1991 where a 307/0 18-gauge door street price, polystyrene street price was $154.
Oh, wow.
145. I remember when we raised it to 154. It's as a salesperson, you're really obligated to say, do you want to talk about the other available options? And the question becomes is how do you equip yourself to have that conversation? And luckily, the Steel Door Institute, SDI.org, they've got a design guide or a selection guide. And it has a chart in it that and they put it into, it's not it's not SDI.org, it's SDI.
Steeldoor.org, maybe?
Yeah, I think that's what it is. Yeah, they couldn't, they were too slow. So steeldoor.org, under standards, their technical data series, recommended selection and usage guide for steel doors. I mean, literally on page 2, which is the page 1 really, that's what you're looking at. And, you're going to see in construction documents a reference to that classification. So we're almost always going to be dealing with a level 1 door. Pardon me, a level 2 door.
Okay.
Level 2 model 1. Level 2 model 1 is all the time. Level 2 model 1. The difference between model 1 and model 2 is they'll take that level 1 full flush door and they'll weld the edges of the door together. Usually not continuously welding, although AmWeld was doing that. But they will be welding it at so many inches on center to give you the 2 face sheets, which if you look in cross-section kind of look like a pan. And indeed, that's what at least one manufacturer would call that. It's the pan. And you take those 2 pans and you put them together. Well, you can lock those together, but then you can lock them together and weld them together. It makes for a stronger door. It really does. So that becomes a level 2 model 2. When they're saying, 18 gauge works, but I want something stronger, so weld all that together. Because the amount of welding that might be on a level 2 model 1 may be standard. Where, it's not a school, but it is a Dunkin' Donuts. Rather than level 2 model 1, let's go with a model 2. Because those doors are sometimes 3'6", wider doors, heavier doors. And not that it's always okay to go thicker, heavier, more expensive, because it's not.
Right.
Putting a $500 door on a lock on a coat closet is inappropriate.
Right.
Like in the classroom, the teacher's little lockup, if they have one, that doesn't need the expensive lock. So determining where the client needs to be is where it starts. But a lot of clients don't want to have that conversation because they don't know and they don't need to know. And that's going to be level 2 model 1. And every manufacturer is going to use that. And when you're looking in, like for me, the Seco Legion door, Legion and Ultra, and study the difference between the 2 of those. They'll look almost identical, except one's beveled and the other's square edge.
Give me those names again. Because I had Regent and Medallion, now I got Legion, and what was the other one?
Ultra.
Ultra? Okay.
Yeah. I never sell Regent doors because I don't want to sell honeycomb. And Medallion I sell when I need a 16 gauge door and it happens to be steel stiffened. But the Legion door, to me, that's just your bread and butter. And that's going to be 18 gauge. They can do it thicker. It's going to be polystyrene. And that's so, and then of course, when you're talking to a customer about steel doors, the issue is it really needs to be the correct size. So a lot of times that you're going to have a conversation with a client is going to be about, I need a door. Well, what do you mean? I need a door. The frame's good. I just want the door. And what's most critical there is to make sure that the width and the height and the location and preparation of the hardware is all accurately placed. Because you can be a 1/16 of an inch off, and you could probably hammer that or grind that in place. But if anything's off, it's just not going to work right. It's not going to fit. So it's really important that all that is correct.
Yeah, I think that's like the flag that's been worrisome. Over time, these are steel pieces of material. There's no give. You got to get it right. So, but I absolutely understand that. Yeah, there's no fixing it on the tail end.
Well, I mean, there's always tips and tricks, and SDI also publishes standards on how to field fit material as well, and how to shim doors. But our obligation is to basically go to the client and extract from them, and that's what you've got to do sometimes, extract it. They're giving you the data. Well, they're loosey-goosey. They're telling you it's 7.5, 37.5, and 67.5. No, it's not. You've got to. Now, I'll make that, but I'm telling you it's a boat anchor when you get it because your second and third hinges are for sure off. And, so getting the data from them is number one. Number two is getting it to the manufacturer faithfully is number two. Number three is the manufacturer faithfully producing it. And, other than determining what the client needs, it's getting it entered correctly, like you would with anything else. The problem with doors and frames is it's not a compression pulley where there is a 6-digit part number, that's it.
Mm-hmm.
No variations, nothing to talk about.
Right.
But with a door, they're almost always curated. Unless you're doing new installation, at which point it's an easier conversation to have because you're being told what you need and you have to worry about the nuances because you're ordering doors and frames. But in order to successfully take a call from someone that says, oh, I need a door. Okay, great. Tell me about the opening. And then you make a decision based on experience of what level and model you should recommend. It's looking at what the manufacturer's catalog has that complies with that. A good baseline always is 18 gauge and polystyrene. And then determining, if the manufacturer can easily produce what you need. And what you need is based on the aforementioned, but also how it has to be prepped. Because we've done doors prepped for every conceivable hardware type. I've done doors that are just extreme garden variety, and I've done 12 gauge frames, 14 gauge doors where they were laminating 12 gauge onto it, and it was hung on sauce, and they were returning around the edge of the door, so every dimension had to be detailed. How much additional inset, how much additional margin for the thickness of the 12 gauge, but not only the 12 gauge thickness, how thick of a layer of adhesive do you think you're going to have on there? So it could get really detailed, but the bottom line is, once you start selling doors, you do start thinking about these things, and then sooner or later, it becomes absolutely standard to think in those terms. And it's also helpful to have been to a manufacturer where you can see how they actually do it. So when a customer calls you and says, I need this, so an example of that would be, I need a hollow metal frame with a 3/4 inch face, where hollow metal frames are generally 2 inch. I can say with confidence that is not possible because the press brake tooling is not going to be able to bend that material based on a 3/4 inch dimension here, a 1/2 inch dimension here, and then a 1 15/16 dimension here. The tooling won't go in and bend. So we have to have so when you see the manufacturing process, you become much more comfortable with talking about it because you can see how it's made. You see a CNC turret punching steel in the flat, and you learn, oh, okay, all he did there was punch out the holes for the hinges, and then it's going to go to a guy at a press brake where he's going to put the bend in the steel. Wow, now it's starting to look like a door. So very helpful to see a manufacturer as well. And then, of course, where I really got started with hollow metal doors was sitting on a 3-day class or a 2-day class. And back in those days, it was class, during the day and then the bar at night with all your classmates. And it still is the same, but that sort of approach is how you have a conversation about steel doors. Tell me about the one that you're working on now.
The one I'm working on now, let's see here. So I actually just got approval. Yeah, those 10 of them. I actually just got confirmation from him today on the standard light 5x20 is going to work.
Exposed, great.
Correct, yep, exposed size, right. And then he confirmed he just needs a single bore or a single hole cut out for the lock set, so he confirmed both of those things. So I think we're actually good to go ahead and get the order entered. I just got that note, shortly before I called you. So
yeah,
I think I'll be changing those parts and entering that order today.
Well, yes, but with doors, wood or steel or frames, you always double check. You just go back to square one. What did the guy tell me? Is it in writing? Am I faithfully interpreting that? And you always do a double check because, it's not a compression pulley.
Right.
Meaning, you're always dealing with LTL shipping, so that's very costly. Doors show up. A guy's got people on the job site ready to hang doors, and if there's something wrong and it's your fault, it's a major needle scratch for everyone involved. Right. So you want to do your part to eliminate the possibility of mistake, acknowledging we're all human and it's going to happen. but you want to bring your percentage down so low that it's almost undetectable. But it will happen.
Yeah.
But we're all
boat anchors on a $12,000 door order doesn't sound very fun. So
no.
I would definitely have somebody check that before we spend any money.
No, absolutely.
Double, triple.
That's very much recommended. And the fact of the matter is, the value of scrap steel on that stuff is so low. It's a true tragedy. It costs more to pick it up than what you can get out of it of recycling steel.
Right.
But doors are.
Go ahead.
Doors are fun. Doors are, it gets boring selling hinges.
Okay. So this is the more exciting thing. I mean, and I can see if I have a handle on these different components, it would be more fun to talk about and to figure out, because it's a little bit of a puzzle, compared to just some certain specific pieces of hardware. There's a whole lot to consider when doing this. So I can see what you mean. It could be kind of exciting and interesting, definitely learning. Here was one question I have for you that I wrote down. How big of an impact does lead time play generally indoors, or is it always project specific? Like, is there an understanding within the industry that most of the time doors take a certain amount of time, or is that not the case in construction industry because people want things now all the time?
Yeah, one thing that's true in our business is nobody plans ahead. And that's why your ASA Abloys and all their service centers, of which there are 7, 8, 9, 10 across the United States, stock thousands of doors, exist. And then the countless other quick ship people, the countless other stocking massive distributors and wholesalers. And it's because, they should have ordered the frames a month ago, and I got a mason coming next week. So the answer to me is, the answer is, when you speak to your client, when do you need this? When do you have to have this on site? That is the initial funnel. So you might want to use a medallion galvanized because the application calls for it. Guess what? That's 8 weeks. Well, now we're looking at an 18-gauge polystyrene because it's the only thing you can get your hands on. I just shipped earlier this month. Client needed, the spec called for, there's 8 openings. We shipped the first 3. Spec calls for thermal brake frames. Now look up thermal brake frames at some point. That is a unusual animal to sell, extremely expensive, exceptionally cool. That's funny because they're meant to help control temperature. Extremely elegant animals, and they were also 12 weeks. So went to the client and said, well, yeah, you need this stuff on site in 3 weeks. Yeah, so the way it was bid was the way it was called out, thermal brake. However, the only thing that's in stock, we can do 14-gauge galvanized from stock, and it's not thermal brake. But what do you want to do? You want to change the schedule of not only the mason but the 7 trades behind him. And the owner made a decision. We're actually okay. Go with what you stock. Well, it's going to cost more because now I'm going to quick shift. So it all worked out in the end, but lead time has everything to do with being a very early part of the conversation, because there's no sense having the conversation if you can't get the order. Then, once you know what the guy needs in terms of time, you can then draw from your list of inventory and says, well, here's what I have that can meet that. And if you don't have anything direct that will meet it, what are the other possible ways to solve the problem that you can meet it? Meaning, the guy's he calls you up and his locations are Fenestra. Fenestra's been out of business for 20 plus years. You don't have a door with those hinge locations, but you got 3070 doors that are polystyrene. Well, okay, what are you going to do? The guy's not going to get that Fenestra door from anyone in a week. You can do it in 3 or 4, but he needs it installed in 10 days because he's got an inspector coming. So you look for ways to sell him something, maybe a continuous hinge, maybe half surface hinges, maybe some other method of hanging the door that doesn't matter where the hinges are located. So it's always, what can you as the sous chef put into your dish that's substituting for what you wanted to use and still going to give you a good dish at the end. So, it's that as well. And all of it put together just means doing it. Like, if you ever get someone that calls you and you're in your neck of the woods, offer to go there and stand there at the opening with the guy. It's really how you learn.
Okay.
Tape measure.
Yeah.
The Stanley 12-foot. That's the one you want. The Stanley 12-footer.
Okay. That is, I definitely do learn more hands-on, so and in person. So that's if something like that pops up, definitely opportunity I got to take. I know you mentioned that SECO class in Ontario as well. I think
they're always having those. You can spend 2 months down there. They're always having those. The point is if you find out that you're going to be in a certain neck of the woods, then we check the schedule and see. Because when I was in Las Vegas earlier this year, I needed to renew my ADAM certification. And I took that test on an airplane, and I took it all 3 times, the quiz to maintain. I failed it. So I happened to be in Las Vegas, and I'm like, I've got to retake the full class now because I failed the quiz. And if you don't have the standard in front of you, you're just guessing. Because the ADAM certification is, what's the right answer? Is it 8-inch, 5-inch, 7-inch, or 12-inch? I don't remember.
That's what the manual says.
Yeah, well, and the problem is I was doing it without consulting the standard, and had to go sit for the full 2-day class. Turned out when I was in Vegas already, they had a full 2-day class happening, so I just, it worked out perfectly for me.
Wow.
Yeah, so you want to look for opportunities like that when you can. When the opportunity comes to you and it's free, so to speak, in the sense of if complexity comes for free, why not? Why wouldn't you? If you can get something out of something and it doesn't put a gear in a wrench in the gear works, yeah, because you're going to sit with people that want to learn about it as much as you do, and you'll walk away not only with a better understanding, but a better understanding of how to use the manufacturer's catalog, their price list, and their catalog, because their technical manual, that's how you learn about doors.
Right.
How you learn, like Dutch doors, and you get into stuff, wicket doors, you get into things that are more complex, more interesting. Relying on the technical manual is how you learn about that stuff.
Okay. Well, very good. I think I got some pretty good notes here, questions to ask, and then, as I get additional requests to talk through with you if I need to, and, some good stuff here.
Yeah, you send me over something to review on a door. I'm going to want to see what the client said originally and what you turned it into, because I'm looking for a mistake in that conversion. That's all. I'm looking for an error in that conversion.
Right. And we want to find mistakes, essentially.
Yeah. You know why? Because they're there, and we just have to, the ring is lost on the beach. I just got to beat it with my metal detector and pull it out. The ring is there. It's in the sand. I just have to get it and get it out. And it's there. You know it's there because you dropped it yourself.
Right.
So, I'll be looking for that kind of data, but I'm also, based on my experience, doing a reality check. Does that make sense? Is a dimension off 1/8 of an inch, but the other two are spot on? That ain't going to get past me, because that's wrong. That's wrong. I'm a customer.
Right. Okay. Well, very good. I think I got enough to chew on this one.
All right, my dude. I'll talk to you.
Appreciate you. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.
Architectural Builders Supply hopes you have enjoyed this program. Again, thank you for watching, and if you've enjoyed this video, please click thumbs up, please subscribe, and maybe even send the video to someone that you know. Thank you.